Mr. Ambassador, I know you've had a very successful year, but may we know your most outstanding accomplishments? And I guess there had been some challenges along the way. So what were they and how were you able to survive them?
Well, it's very difficult to say this is the most outstanding. Let me just say the significant accomplishments were, of course, the much better relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines, triggered by the high-level visits that were initiated by the Philippines in June 2011 when our Secretary of Foreign Affairs came to the U.S. Secretary Clinton, in turn, made a visit to the Philippines on November 2011 and signed two agreements, the Manila Declaration and the Statement of Principles on the Partnership for Growth. Those were the two agreements signed in Manila. Then, of course, in January 2012, we had the bilateral strategic dialogue that was followed by the 2+2. That's the first time that we've had a 2+2 meeting, which means very high-level meetings between the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense with their counterparts, Secretary Del Rosario, Secretary Gasmin, meeting with Secretary Clinton and Secretary Panetta. That's the first time that has happened in the history of the Philippines and U.S. relations. Now, that, of course, culminated in the visit of President Aquino to the United States at the Oval Office on June 8, 2012. There were other high-level visits. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dempsey, was in Manila. The commander of the Pacific Command, the U.S. Pacific, or PACOM, Admiral Locklear, also came to Manila. And there were many other visits by senior U.S. officials from State Department, Defense, the Pentagon, the U.S. Trade Representative, the Deputy U.S. Trade Representative. So all these are indications of, as I said, a much stronger relationship. Now, we also established for the first time an organization called the U.S. Philippine Society, which consists of very senior executives from the U.S. and the Philippines, forming a board that would tend to elevate the profile of the Philippines in Washington, D.C. And again, there have been attempts in the past to do that, but this is the first time we've been able to complete the efforts, and we now have a very active U.S.-Philippine Society that in its first year has had a number of accomplishments, including a very successful Philippine conference that was actually organized by the Center for Strategic and International Studies together with the U.S.-Philippine Society, with three senior secretaries or cabinet members who came to speak at that Philippine conference, which drew about 250 people, very, very senior executives, think tank, policymakers, legislative aides, and so on. On top of that, we had a very successful cultural event that we brought to Washington and New York, the Bayanihan dance troupe, which of course impressed the American audiences as well as, of course, the Filipino Americans. But they're more familiar with the Bayanihan. No? So the U.S.-Philippine Society is another major accomplishment. The third is of course, we had for the first time established the Filipino American Young Leaders Program, where we got 10 outstanding young Filipino Americans who we brought to the Philippines so that they would understand better the country of their parents or grandparents. Many of them, of course, have not been to the Philippines in the past. So they were very impressed, they were very inspired, and they came back with very, very lofty ambitions of what they want to do to contribute to strengthening the relations between the Philippines and the U.S. and how they could, in their own way, contribute to that objective. For example, two of them have decided to set up a program called Teach for the Philippines. Mm-hmm. So they're getting young Philams to volunteer 2 years of their time to teach in the rural areas in the Philippines, similar to the Teach for America program, because both of them had participated in that right after high school. So they're trying to do the same now, getting young Philams to come to the Philippines and volunteer to teach in the rural areas in the Philippines. So those are just some of the major accomplishments of the embassy. But of course, there are many others, including strengthening the military and security relationship between the Philippines and the U.S.
The population of the Filipino community is continually growing in the United States, and I'm sure you would be so happy to announce some of the names of those successful people in their various fields of endeavor.
Well, you're correct, no? Because based on the latest census, when you look at the number of Filipino Americans, those who have some Filipino ancestry, that comes out to roughly 3.4 million, making us, I think, the second largest Asian ethnic minority in the U.S., next only to the Chinese Americans. No? And of course, we have quite a number of very successful Filipino Americans. For example, Dr. George Garcia, a noted heart surgeon who practices both here and in the Philippines. So he continues to spend some time in the Philippines performing a lot of very delicate heart surgeries. Then, of course, you have Miss Josie Natori, who lives in New York, and she's well known for her own designs, particularly lingerie, and she's made a name for herself in the fashion industry. Then you have Monique Lullier, who's a celebrity in Hollywood, who caters to Hollywood celebrities for their gowns, particularly for the Oscars and Emmy Awards and so on. So she's quite well known. Then, of course, the head coach of the Miami Heat, Eric Spoelstra, who is also, a Filipino American. So we have many more. For example, the Supreme Court Chief Justice of California is a Filipino American. Cuisia, correct. And I think we can go on and on. As I said, we have many very talented Filipino Americans who have made good names for themselves. The chief financial officer of Nestle is a Filipino American. She's the highest ranking female executive in Nestle. She's Filipino American. She came from Walmart, and she has, I think, distinguished herself. So as I said, we have many more of these talented Filipino Americans who have contributed to to enhancing the image of Filipino Americans in the U.S. No?
Yes. Now we are at the start of 2013. May I know, Mr. Ambassador, what would be your priorities?
Well, our priority continues to be promoting trade investment because the DFA, Department of Foreign Affairs, has three principal pillars. No? Economic diplomacy, the national security of the country, and third is assistance to nationals. This is part of the foreign policy of the Department of Foreign Affairs. But because we have seen that there's tremendous opportunities for trade and investment between the U.S. and the Philippines, we are focusing on that as our principal objective. But that does not mean to say that the other two pillars, national security, are not as important, or assistance to nationals. As you probably read, when we had those Filipino workers who were working on that oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, a number of them were injured. 3 of them actually died. We were there immediately to provide assistance to the workers and their families. We were able to get the company to bring their families to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, so that they could be at the bedside of their loved ones. 3 of them had suffered major burns, and so they were in the hospital for weeks. Fortunately, their families were brought to the U.S., and they were there to comfort their loved ones. So that just shows that the embassy has been together with our consulates, have been very proactive in trying to provide assistance to our nationals.
Yes. I know Filipinos here have always been very helpful and extending their assistance to the Philippines, especially when there are emergencies. Even Radio Manila has conducted a donation program to the Philippines. But, Mr. Ambassador, how else can the Filipinos be of greater help to the Philippines?
Well, again, we say that there should be more Filipino Americans coming to the Philippines, visiting in terms of tourism. We have beautiful places that they can see. For example, the Palawan Underground River has been voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world. And I'm sure many Filipino Americans have not even seen the Underground River. To be honest with you, I just got to see it only last year, in February last year, because precisely I read about how great it is when it was nominated as one of the 7 wonders of the world. So, unfortunately, many of us, take it for granted, and they don't, maybe someday we'll visit. But I think now is the time for them to visit. And I think we would like to see more Filipino Americans invest in their homeland because there are tremendous opportunities, so they can benefit from it too. We have quite a number of projects that are available for them to look at, both big and small. They can, of course, establish businesses of their own in the Philippines. We're encouraging them to take on dual citizenship so that they have no problem about staying in the country, owning property, owning businesses, and so on. So it is also for their own interest, for their own benefit, that they come to the Philippines. But it would, of course, also help in growing the economy.
We'd like to thank you very much, Ambassador Cuisia, for joining us today. But finally, before we really say goodbye on public affairs, please speak to our viewers around the world and give your message for the year.
Well, to our Filipinos and Filipino Americans residing in many parts of the world, I think the Philippines is attracting so much attention because of its superlative performance. When we talk about the economic performance of the country, the stock market, we urge you to come and visit the Philippines, because you will then see also how beautiful our country is and how warm our people are. These are assets that we are very proud of, and we want you to come and see for yourselves that it is more fun in the Philippines.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Cuisia, for joining us today on Public Affairs. Once again, this is Awi Abayari saying goodbye for now. On Public Affairs, Awi TV, another very significant and informative interview with our very own Ambassador Cuisia Jr., direct and live from Washington, D.C., Philippine Embassy.